Hey guys, Chris Fix here, and today I'm going to show you how to install a short throw shifter in your car. In this case, we'll be working on my 1998 Mustang GT, the DriftStang, but this process will be similar, if not identical, on most makes and models. So after watching this video, you'll be able to replace your stock shifter with an improved short throw shifter. Now, I ended up getting a Steeda short throw shifter from LMR. It was highly recommended to me by a bunch of Mustang owners, so I'm excited to get this installed in the DriftStang. If you want your own short throw shifter, I'll leave a link in the description for where you could get one. And real quick, for those of you who don't know, a short throw shifter does exactly what it says. It shortens the throw of the shift, so you don't have to move the shift knob as far to get it into each gear. And the way this works is surprisingly simple. So here's the stock Mustang shifter. You can see the pivot point is right there. Now if we look over to the aftermarket short throw shifter, the pivot point is moved upwards. So by moving the pivot point up, it makes the shifts a lot shorter. So a really simplified way to show you how it works is pretend the shifter is this piece of wood. Right here, where my hand is the pivot point. Up top is where you grab the shifter, that's where the shift knob would be, and then down here, where it hits the side of the house, is where the shifter is clicking into gear. So on a stock shifter, the pivot point is down low, so there's a large throw to shift it into gear. Now a short throw shifter moves that pivot point upwards, and there's a lot shorter of a throw to get it into gear. And that's basically how it works. It's that simple. Now there are three reasons why I'm upgrading to a short throw shifter. First, I want to give you an idea of the stock throw, so watch me row through the gears. And by row through the gears, I really mean row. Shifting this thing is like rowing a boat. And the long throws not only slow down your acceleration, but it also keeps your hand on the shifter for a longer period of time rather than on the steering wheel. And while driving and performing any type of motorsport like drifting, you want to try to keep your hands on the steering wheel as much as possible to maintain control of the car. Besides the long throw of the shifter, the second problem is my shifter is very clunky. Trying to find gears could be challenging, especially when you purposely skip a gear, like if you're braking hard and downshifting. And I'm not sure if you noticed, but the spring in my stock shifter is non-existent. The shifter is supposed to spring into the middle when in neutral, which helps you find the next gear, especially when you're going from second to third gear. And finally, since this is the DriftStang, I'm excited to show you guys my brand new ASD Hydro e-brake, which I will be making an install video for, so stay tuned. But for now, this is the area I want to install it in. The only issue is the shifter in first and in second comes very close to the Hydro e-brake. So I'm hoping with a short throw shifter, it stays tighter in here and there's more room for the e-brake. Now before we install the new shifter, I want to take a measurement on the old shifter to see how long the throw is. So I'm going to put it in first gear, measure it from the front of the shift knob, and shift it from first into second. And that's about a 4.5 inch throw, which is a lot for a sports car. So now that we have the throw distance for the stock shifter, let's go and install our short throw shifter and see the improvement we get. So the first step is to remove the shift knob, and all you have to do in most cases is just unscrew it. In this case, I have an aftermarket shift knob, so I have an adapter on here that I just need to unscrew. Once your shift knob is removed, now we need to remove this plastic bezel around the shifter. And the easiest way is just to grab underneath here and pop it out. On the Mustang, we have a cigarette lighter, so we need to make sure that we remove the wires from that before we pull it out. So just remove the ground wire and then the power wire, and now the bezel is detached and it slides right off. Next, we want to remove the shifter handle, which is connected by 2 bolts down here. Break each of those loose with the ratchet, and then we could hand loosen them the rest of the way. That's 1, and that's 2. Now we can wiggle off the shifter handle, and there we go. Next, we need to remove our lower shifter boot, which is held in by 2 bolts down here, and then 2 bolts back there. An extension is going to help here, and we're going to start with the front bolts. That's 1, and the other. Now moving to the back 2 bolts, these are a little bit harder to get to, but still not bad. And make sure you don't lose these bolts because we're going to be reusing them. Now just lift the lower shift boot and get it over the shifter, and then it slides right out. And now we have access to the shifter. To remove the shifter, there are 4 bolts, similar to the lower shift boot we just removed. These are 13mm, and that is a lot harder to break loose than I expected. So time to use a breaker bar. So with the breaker bar, break all 4 bolts loose, and it's amazing how a little extra leverage makes it so easy to break these loose. Now we can get back in there with our ratchet and remove the 2 front bolts, and then remove the 2 rear bolts to free our shifter. And with all 4 bolts removed, grab a flathead screwdriver or a pry bar and pry the base of the shifter to remove it from the transmission. And the old shifter should come right out just like that. Look at all that play. That's why sometimes it was hard to get into gear or it felt clunky. There's a ton of play in this. Now if we compare that To our aftermarket shifter, there is no play at all in this. This feels nice and solid. So our new shifter has none of that slop in it, but another piece that we're going to be replacing to make the shifts feel firmer is this plastic bushing. The old plastic bushing is right down in here, and it comes out just like that. And although this bushing looks like it's in good shape, I'm kind of curious about how much wear it has, so I have a caliper here. I'm going to measure the inside diameter, and we have about 16 millimeters. That's the width inside. And here I have our new bushing. So if we check the inside diameter of this, there should be a smaller number. Wow, almost by 1 millimeter. So the old bushing had a 16 millimeter gap, and the new bushing has a 15 millimeter gap. So there's an extra millimeter of material in here. So that should give us a lot tighter of a fit. So this ended up being worth the extra few bucks since mine was worn. And it just slides right in, so it's easy to replace. Now we want to install our new shifter, but before we do that, the old shifter was sealed to the transmission with a gasket. You could actually see some of the leftover gasket still stuck on the transmission, so we want to clean this mating surface. And since we don't want any of the old gasket material falling into the transmission, it's a good idea to shove a towel down there to seal it off. Also, when removing the old gasket, I highly suggest using a plastic scraper and not a metal one. A plastic scraper isn't going to damage the surface, but if you use a metal one, it could grab an edge and gouge the surface, which could cause a leak. And then if you want to get it perfect, grab an abrasive sponge or Scotch-Brite and get the rest of that gasket off. With the mating surface clean, carefully remove the paper towel so you don't drop any debris into the transmission. And now you have two different options. You could go with the already made gasket, or you could use an RTV gasket maker. This is a lot less messy, and that's what I'm going to go with. But if you don't want to buy a gasket, you could use RTV gasket maker and spread a thin layer of gasket maker around the edge, and it accomplishes the same exact thing. Alright, so let's install the shifter. I found it easier to line the gasket on the shifter first, and then push the shifter ball joint right into the bushing without moving the gasket. Just like that. And now we can bolt it down with the included bolts. And I want to add some medium strength thread locker to the bolts because there's a lot of vibration in the transmission. This thread locker could be easily removed with hand tools, but it prevents the bolts from loosening up while you drive. The bolts are now ready to be hand tightened, so the shifter is held in place. And you want to snug them up in a crisscross pattern so they tighten evenly and that gasket gets compressed evenly. You really don't have to, but I like to use a torque wrench to get it exact. And the bolts get tightened to 15 pound-feet of torque. Good, so now our shifter is in, and now we want to adjust our shift stops. And there's two shift stops, there's one back here and one up here, so let's adjust this one first. And what we need to do is we need to put this into 4th gear, so make sure it clicks completely into gear just like that, so we can make our adjustment. All the shift stop is a bolt, and you want to tighten the bolt until it just touches the handle of the shifter. Once it's touching, then you want to back the bolt off about 1/4 of a turn. Now if you really want to get technical, you could get a feeler gauge, and there's supposed to be a 1/100th of an inch gap in here. So this is a 100th of an inch feeler gauge, and it just has slight resistance. I'm actually going to back it off just a little bit more. It's better to have these a little bit looser than a little bit too tight, because you want to make sure that you go completely into gear. So you want to back this off about 1/2 a turn, and that'll give you a 1/100th of an inch gap. Once your gap is adjusted properly, get a little bit of thread locker, put it on the threads, hold the bolt head in place, and tighten up your nut. Use one wrench to hold the bolt and another one to tighten the nut so it's locked into place. Then move the shifter forward and then bring it back, and there should be a visible air gap between the shift stop and the shifter. And this looks perfect. Now we'll do the same thing for the other shift stop, so put it into 3rd. And the whole point of these shift stops is to prevent you from overextending your shift and damaging the selector forks in your transmission, especially when you're shifting aggressively. Now you want to quickly test out each gear to make sure it feels smooth and is going into gear. Make sure the shift stops aren't touching the shifter and everything looks good. So let's get the boot on and finish this up. Now this shifter comes with a washer to keep the boot from getting pinched while you're shifting. With the washer on, we could then add the lower shift boot, which slides right over the shifter, and then tighten down the 4 bolts we removed earlier to hold the lower shift boot in place. We are so close to being done. I can't wait to test this shifter out. Now we could bolt on our shifter handle, and there's a few adjustments we can make. First, do we want it on this side or on this side? I'm going to put it on this side so I have more clearance for the hydro e-brake. And the other adjustment is, do we want it up top or down below? I'm going to have mine up higher because I think that's going to be more comfortable. And instead of connecting the shifter handle directly to the shifter, they give us this rubber insulating bushing, which is going to help with vibration and transmission noise. So hand tighten a bolt with some thread locker on it. Good. Screw in the bottom one as well. Then tighten them with a ratchet so they're nice and snug. On the other side, you want to use the supplied jam nuts to ensure the shifter handle doesn't come loose. And tighten them down with a ratchet. Good. Now grab your shifter boot and let's connect the cigarette lighter. Connect the ground and the power wire, and then slide the boot over the shifter handle. The plastic trim just pushes in and clicks into place. And all we have left to do is to attach the shift knob. I use a little thread locker for the adapter pieces and screw them on. And then tighten it with a wrench, and now the shift knob just threads right on. Perfect. Alright, and that's all there is to installing a short throw shifter. Now let's get this in first gear and get a measurement to see how long the throw is now. So we're measuring from the same place as before, the top of the gear knob in first gear. Moving into second, we're at about 3.5 inches. Before we had 4.5 inches, so we shortened the throw by 1 inch. Not only did we shorten the throw by 1 inch, but if we get our hydro e-brake and we put it in place, and then we put this into first, look at that gap. That is a lot larger than what we had before. And if we put it in second, again, we have a lot of room here, so there's plenty of clearance, and that's because we moved the shifter over just a little bit. So now I can roll through the gears with the hydro e-brake not getting in the way. And now let's do what we've all been waiting for. Let's go for a ride. Holy smokes, what a difference. Not only is the throw shorter, but every shift feels amazing. There's this nice, satisfying click to each gear. Yes! I can't believe how much better this is. And that's all it takes to install a short throw shifter. As always, I hope the video was helpful, and if you aren't a subscriber, consider subscribing. Next, I'll be showing you guys how to install that hydraulic e-brake, which is going to be awesome, so stay tuned.